Okay, I have an interesting problem that I think you'll enjoy in terms of using data validation. So here is a problem from a hospital care hospital unit, and we have basically a form here, and the form has 4 fields that a user can input. And again, we want to make sure that we are restricting or limiting the data input to add some integrity to the data, to make sure that erroneous data is not being entered in. And we do that through a process called data validation. So to look at the problem overall, we have a patient's name, and we can put any value we want in for patient's name. So I'll go ahead and do that. Put here Bob Smith, and he can enter it in, and he could use any characters he'd like or do what he wants right there. So we have free form, any value input into the patient's name. Below it, though, we want to get a little bit more restrictive. Here we have a hospital code. Now, for where we're working, we only have 5 hospitals that are valid input into this form. We cannot put any other hospital because that would cause confusion downstream when someone tries to process this data. So we want a high level of data validation on this field hospital code. And we want to restrict it just to these 4 values, okay? Below that is the service code. Now the service code is a little bit more lenient because different hospitals have different service codes. Here are the ones that everybody uses. There's 4 of them, right? There's X-ray, transportation, a waiting room, and surgery. But certain hospitals might have some other ones. They might have COVID at their hospital, so they have a special number for that, whereas another hospital might not be accepting COVID patients. So we're okay for the data in here to be a little bit different than what's on the list. And then finally, there's a description. We want to limit to 25 characters. I won't cover that one. I'll leave that to the user here of this exercise. But let's go ahead and let's work on the hospital code. We want to restrict this one, okay? So what we're going to use is our data validation tool that's in Excel. So if you go to the top, very top, and we select the data tab, we're going to find underneath the data tools, the data validation form that pops up when we select data validation. And this tool is kind of interesting. It has 3 tabs across the top, right, that populate the information below. On the settings tab, the validation criteria can be selected. On the input message tab, a message could be inputted when an individual selects the cell. So if they were to select hospital code, it might say, please enter the appropriate hospital code from the list. And then there's an error alert if you went out of range. And within the error alert, it has restrictions and more leniency as you go. So the stop is the most stringent. It'll say, stop what you're doing, you've done something wrong. And we can put the title of an error message and an error message in here to tell them that information. It also has a warning. There's a little yield sign with an exclamation point. We might want to say, your data is not on the list, double check it, something like that, okay? So that's the style of that. And the final one is information. Information might be make sure that your codes are all in capitals or something like that. It's up to the individual. So let's go ahead and let's start to solve this problem. Now, the first thing we want to do is look at this hospital code, and we want to make sure that we restrict it to just the list and only the list below that's identified here. So let's select the cell, select data validation, and let's go to settings, right? So now here we want to have just provide the user with a list. Let's go ahead and pick a list. And the list is going to be just from this hospital code table and nowhere else. We could type them in by hand, but if we did that, we might misspell something, right? Or we might type a code wrong, and that's pretty much not what we want to do, especially with data validation. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to select the list, and we'll hit OK. And it rendered that list within the tool. We go over here, we notice something. There's a drop down. If we select that drop down, we now have the list of hospital codes that we wanted to have in there all along, right? We have the general hospital, the regional one, and the special care unit. We don't have to worry about spelling or anything because we basically are using that table in and of itself. And the user can go ahead and select which one they want from the dropdown, right? Maybe I should make that a little wider. But we didn't put any restrictions on it. Somebody can enter bad data still, or data that's outside the range of hospital codes. So let's go back to data and then over to data validation. Let's get back to this form. This is where we entered these settings for the hospital codes in the source. And let's go over to the error alert. Now we want to pick the stop, which is already pre-selected because that's the most restrictive. And let's give it a title. We'll call it hospital codes. And we'll put in here a message. Now the message we could put in here almost, we'll put anything we want, but since this is pretty restrictive, we'll just say stop, put an exclamation point, and we'll put only values from the hospital codes are permitted. Please call the support center if your hospital code is out of range. And we can put a phone number in there if we want. So we'll hit OK. And now let's go ahead, and we still see the drop down, and we can still select from the list that we wanted all along. But if we decided that, wow, you know, he did not go, this patient did not go, Bob Smith, to any of these hospitals. I'm pretty sure he went to the Southside Emergency Care Unit. And you can see I made some typos, right? We don't want that data to get past this system. But that's what this individual does. They hit enter, and look what happened. It rejected it. Right, the title of it was hospital codes of the warning message, and we put in here stop, right? Only, I misspelled here, right? Only valid information is accepted. So we could try retry, but we could hit cancel, and it'll go back to where we were on that list. So there you go. That's restricting that line item to this list and only to this list that's available for hospital codes. Let's go ahead and look at the service codes. Right, now the service codes, we want it semi-restricted. So we want to give them this list, and if they type something out of range, we want to accept it, but we'll just make sure that they know it was out of range, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to select the service code cell. We'll go up to data, which we're already there, data validation. And now again, we're going to go through the same process. We'll go to settings. The validation criteria is listed below. We're going to allow a list because we do have a list, right? Here's the list of the source list of service codes. Let's go ahead and enter these service codes by hand this time instead of selecting, right? 785, comma, 496, comma, 200, comma, and 234. So those are the numbers that we have in here. And look what happened. We have that same functionality of a drop-down list of just those service codes within this list. But we're yet to put any validation restrictions on this, and we're going to go ahead and do that next. So we select the cell, data validation. We're going to go to the error message, and we're going to select a warning. Now, a warning gives the user information and does accept the data that was entered. So let's just call this one service codes, put SC codes at the top. And then in here, we'll say, let's see, what's a good message to warn somebody? We could put the word warning, but let's put this: beware as of, we'll give it a date, June, COVID service codes are permitted. See Form 07A for details. And we can put in here or call and put a phone number in there, etc., so that they know what to do. Okay, so let's hit OK. We're going to go back and we're going to select our service codes. And here's the list of them, 234, etc. But we think that service code 505, which deals with COVID, is important. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter. And that's the service code that Bob had at South Walk in hospital. And look, there's our message. The title, service codes, is there. That's not very informative, but we can put that there for now. And we could put in, here's our message, beware as of June, right? Using form 7A. So do you want to continue? So if I were to say yes, it would accept the data. Let's do that. So there you go. It actually took 505, right? So what did we see? We saw that we can administer data validations in Excel by using the data validation tool, and we can enter and restrict data in different ways based on the need.